That's what Big Pharma is excellent at doing. And, they're not going to stop. And when they find out that the government's complicit, and when you realize that everybody on mainstream media, there's 5 corporations that control them, and the number one way that Sanjay Gupta and Dr. Wen are paid is with the dollars that Pfizer just made on you. I mean, last quarter, Moderna made $6 billion and Pfizer made $18.7 billion on the jab. So I got news for you. If you don't think this is one of the best pipelines that Big Pharma has ever found, and all they're doing is using that money from the government, and what is the government doing? They're printing money at record rates from the taxpayer. They're actually stealing from the taxpayer to make the plan go. If you don't think this is not a brilliant plan, then you're asleep at the wheel, because this is absolutely outstanding, and it's about time people like you, people like Dr. Malone, anybody who's willing to put the target on their back to educate the sleeping. I'm actually almost past that point, to be honest with you. I'm not interested in waking up to sleep anymore. I'm interested in waking up the other lions. I look at you like a lion. Hopefully when you make this movie, people watching it get mad as hell. And they go, wait a minute, we've been sold a bill of goods, and not only does it go past the biologics story, there's actually a bigger story here. And it just goes to show you how carefree the government really is. We're looked at as, acceptable collateral damage. The same way that a general will look at taking a hill in Iwo Jima. We show great pictures and war pictures, how wonderful that is. But if you really think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. And are they doing the same thing with these messenger RNA technologies? Will there be people harmed by this? And will the harm be blatantly obvious? No. I mean, we already know VAERS in the yellow card, the ADE stuff, none of that. It's tenfold underreporting. Yeah. So if that's the case, then our last hope is for people like you, taxpayers, to put your money out, go find scientists, go find clinicians that aren't afraid of getting the arrows in their back, ruining their careers. Like I said, I think the reason I respect Malone so much, this guy should win a Nobel Prize for what he's discovered. And he realizes that his technology has been utilized in a plan to harm a lot of people. And is he taking it lying down? No, he's fighting with tooth and nail. He's using his intellect to teach people what to do. And I happen to respect a guy like that takes his Hippocratic oath very seriously. I happen to take it very seriously, and I do my part. I say the things I say. I've connected dots. I think if you think that this story is just about a vaccine passport, I have to tell you something. I think you missed the boat.
Yeah, well, and let me get into this, because for yourself personally, and this is what's been in the back of my mind. I mean, looking at the extraordinary time you spent in developing your career, both academically and then professionally and clinically, you saying the types of things you're saying right now has to come at great personal peril and personal risk. So, what has this been like for you to be saying the things you're saying? And do you feel like your license might come under threat, or other threats that might come at you?
Yeah, I do. But I will tell you, and you'll probably understand why we had to do this video very quickly. I told you I'm headed to another country. And Jack has been going to other countries to look for the escape route. In other words, another place that's going to be safer to pack my parachute medically in the future. And I will tell you, the place that I'm headed tomorrow with specifics is El Salvador. And I'm going to El Salvador because they did something probably in the last month that is really good for people like me. I told you that I believe in medical and financial sovereignty. Well, they made Bitcoin legal tender. So where am I looking? I'm looking to leave my own country. And I'm going in different places to see where they won't mandate a vaccine passport for me to travel. See, unlike Dr. Malone, I have to tell you I'm a little bit more crafty than him, because he's focused in on the biologic side. I'm looking at the greater 30,000-foot view. And I believe when you participate in Bitcoin, which is an anti-central bank digital token, it's an anti-treasury device, it's an anti-FDA device, it's an anti-CDC, anti-Fauci, anti-anything that you could think about. It provides complete self-sovereignty so that anybody who puts a mandate on me, I can do whatever I want. And that's the key. The key is to build self-sovereignty, you have to understand how far you have to take it. Medically, what I would tell people in the United States, and this may be tough for people to hear, maybe even tough for you to hear, most of the people in the United States are now subject to centralized medicine. What does that mean? It's the same thing as the central bank. You are controlled by the people who control your doctors. All the doctors on Twitter have blue checks. They are employees for somebody else. Whatever the employer says, the doctor has to do. Otherwise, they face getting fired or deplatformed. Okay. Well, what have I been building in my practice for 15 years? Something called decentralized medicine, meaning that if you were my patient and you came to see me, no one gets between you and I. In other words, I'll tell you what I think the data says, I'll tell you what I think it means, and we'll develop a game plan together that not only covers your financial risks, your medical risks, but also your political risks. Because I will tell you, I've often said that zip code will trump your genetic code, and people laughed at me 15 years ago when I said it. And I would tell you right now, if you live in California, Illinois, or New York versus Florida, tell me I'm wrong.
True.
Especially with respects to COVID. And you know what? Right now, here we are in August 2021, and people still don't get this idea. But I have to tell you, the people that follow me, they've been hearing this for 10 years. Now, did I think the dominoes were going to fall the way in which they've fallen in 2019, 2020, and 2021? No, I didn't. But do I now see through my glasses differently than maybe a lot of the other people that you interviewed, and maybe even you? I want you to see something that you may not see. See, I always tell people that the smartest people out there, they're able to see the future before the future happens.
Right.
And everything that's happening to us today foretells a big problem is coming in the United States. We are headed for abject government collapse, and it's going to start on the economic side. If you understand, when you have a government default, how is that going to happen? How are they going to be able to pull this off without a revolution? You know, and this is when I usually hand a book, you know, that Ray Dalio has written called The End of Debt Cycles. And when you begin to understand that the government's stance for the last 50 years has been, how can we end this debt cycle but not cause a war? And I have to tell you, medical tyranny is top of that list. They're pulling off absolutely amazing stuff right now because, unlike my generation, the boomer generation, young people are very compliant. They're perfectly happy as long as you give them Starbucks and Netflix and a video game to play on. They don't really question what's going on. And I think the people that are in my generation, I saw my grandfather, I saw my father fight in World War I and World War II. They died for these freedoms that I feel like every day I get up, I want to know, what freedom have we given up today? And the problem is, this goes back to Anne Ryan's book, Atlas Shrugged. What happens when you wake up in a world and you're 60 years old and you look to your left and look to your right and the world is completely changed? Nobody seems to think questioning the media, the government, or your politicians or the central bank or the FDA or the CDC is a wise thing to do. No, let's just comply. How did that work? With Hitler, he tried to get people to comply. How did that go? And it amazes me how many people out there right now are making the same mistake Thomas Jefferson made with Benjamin Rush.
Yep.
And I think this is the crux of the issue, to truly understand COVID. And when you truly do understand COVID, then I'm going to tell you, I want you to read books about Martin Luther King and Gandhi. Civil disobedience is what mandates should get. People should say no. Remember, governments are supposed to be afraid of their people, not the other way around.
Right.
And we make them afraid when we go to vote. And the thing is, we need to realize these need to be single issue voting things. You can't bring all the other things into it. When you are at economic war with your government, you have a duty to yourself to do the right thing. And if COVID is your issue, this vaccine's your issue, then I want to see you out doing what the French are doing what the Belgians are doing. I don't want you sitting in Vermont eating Ben & Jerry's ice cream saying, hey, it's okay to be a vegan because Eat Lancet tells me that way, and Klaus Schwab's behind it. That doesn't sit well with me.
And that's one of my questions, because I know about the demonstrations going on in France, and that there's a resistance there that, of course, the media's not covering. You wouldn't see it in the mainstream media anywhere. But my question is, why do you think it's happening there and it's not happening here?
Oh, that's simple. You just have to be an aficionado of history. How did we get the Statue of Liberty, my friend? French Revolution. Who supported the American Revolution? The French. Look, the French are really, I always make fun of them. The French are easy to make fun of politically because they usually don't stand up for anything, but usually when they get pissed off, their revolutions are pretty ass-kicking. They cut people's heads off. They take no prisoners. And the thing is, if you mess with French cooking, French cheese, French wine, or it sounds like French medical sovereignty, you've crossed the line.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't know. I think American culture is insulated from that part of France. And do I think we need to see that? I do. I don't know what the line in the sand is going to be for people in America to see it. I personally hope that Dr. Malone is wrong and that the booster shots don't create ADE and we create a variant of COVID that actually kills. It's a killer virus. Right now, this is not a killer virus. The IFR on this is a joke. The only change to Delta is, it's about 5 to 8 times more infective, but it's not a virus that's going to do a lot of people in. But we don't know if the next variant's going to be different. And it turns out the media wants to slant it, just like Fauci and the CDC, that, hey, it's the unvaccinated that are causing this. anybody who's a scientist that reads a field virology book knows that ADE happens in people who are vaccinated. And this is the kind of basic information. Who packs your parachute? Do you trust the guys with the blue checks that practice in a centralized medical situation, or guys like me where I don't take your insurance? You want to come see me? You're going to have to pay me money. But I can promise you, as frank as I'm being with you right now, that's about as frank as I am with my patients. I light everything on fire, and I make sure that I go deeper than most people want to know.
Yeah, well, this is, I think probably going back to the big picture and prognosticating, as you said, I think the most brilliant people are the ones who, can look into the future, maybe deep into the future, and see what's going to happen. You brought up Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged, which my intellectual mentor was Nathaniel Branden, who was her intellectual heir. So I literally just reread Atlas Shrugged, my 11th journey through it recently, just for context. And that book was published in 1957, and basically, in many ways, is a work of nonfiction at this point as far as how things are unfolding. It's become reality, and this stuff.
If you read it 11 times, she got the idea. She lived through the Bolshevik Revolution. Well, guess what? That's kind of the same kind of revolution that we're going through right now. Basically, exactly. The policies of the World Economic Forum, which are socialist, are being brought to our shores. And the problem is, people are so asleep now because we live in a technocracy that they're just worried about what's on Netflix, worried that they can see football, and A-OK that they can eat McDonald's. It's amazing to me that you see people on social media will be vaccinated and scream at unvaccinated people that they're terrible and this and that. Well, why isn't it that those people before COVID didn't go slap Big Macs and Coca-Colas out of people's mouths because that was a problem?
They're so full of contradictions. We could spend hours pointing them out, but let's just say that there's a huge contradiction in the people who are asserting such things, such as this moral judgments that they're placing. But when we take a look at their past behaviors, they're living in glass houses. Let me ask you maybe this question, maybe as a summary or kind of a final question on the personal side. So for all the reasons you described, you're looking to get out of the country and find a safe haven. Do you have a concern that you'll never be able to come back?
Probably my number one concern now is, will I take the jab? Because I think that could happen, but I'm going to be honest with you. The 4th, 6th, probably 14th Amendment are on my side. Mm-hmm. The construction of the court, the way it stands now, right now I'm optimistic, not wildly, but optimistic. Do I think what we really need from your documentary is enough people to get pissed off to say there's lawyers out there that are willing to take this as a class action suit, make it a Supreme Court case, and actually create a law that says you cannot force anybody to get vaccinated. And not only that, the other big problem is corporations right now are doing the government's dirty work. That also needs to be fought. Because right now, people economically are being forced to do this because they're being told, if you're not vaccinated by September 15th, look, the government just tried to do this with the military. There's tons of corporations out there that are doing this right now to their employees. That's the reason I said to you earlier, if you don't think that this is an economic war, you are asleep at the wheel. They are going to force what they want. And do I think that someday, as Dr. Malone said, that you may have to take a jab to travel back to the United States? I think in the current regime of things, very likely, but I have a good feeling by 2024, that may not be the case.
Yeah.
What am I doing right now? I'm visiting countries that are doing things to help my self-sovereignty, because I understand the way to help my self-sovereignty the best is to make sure that I have enough economic freedom to basically put my middle finger up at my government when they try to perform medical tyranny or viral tyranny on me. So that's my plan of attack. My plan of attack, I can tell you, probably decidedly different than anybody else you've interviewed.
Yeah, well, but it comes from a wider context, which informs what your plan of attack should be. And I appreciate your courage in sharing all of that here, and the fact that you kind of rushed this in before you're departing. But I can't tell you how important this interview was for this particular series and for people to understand the bigger picture, because you lost the forest for the trees when you start to say, well, what's the risk of the vaccine versus what's not the risk of the vaccine. It's an issue, but there's a much greater issue at hand, and you uniquely have this extraordinary ability to organize it all and to be able to present it in a very tangible way. So I just can't tell you how much I not only thank you for taking the time with us, but also just thank you for having the courage to take a stand on all these issues and to speak publicly about it. Because as you cited for Dr. Malone, it probably did cost him the Nobel Prize. And for yourself, again, this is something that can really have an adverse effect on your career. But nonetheless, the truth is important, and I'm glad that you're taking a stand on it.
No problem.
That completes my interview with Dr. Jack Kruse. Really was glad that you were here to experience him like I did. Thanks for being here and sharing your time with me so that we can share this information with you. I have great admiration for James Lyons Weiler. He's a PhD with special expertise in the areas that concern COVID. And he is like my go-to guy when something is complex and I'm trying to understand it, that he can explain it in ways and interpret it so I can wrap my brain around it. So I'm glad that people like him exist that have these big, high horsepower brains that have the experience and that can survey this territory known as COVID and interpret what's going on and give you some great insight. This interview is a two-part interview, so we're going to start part one right now. Enjoy my interview with Dr. James Lyons Weiler. James Lyons Weiler, my go-to scientist, the guy I like to talk to when I'm trying to understand things that are way too complicated for me. So we've had some conversations in the past, and I'm really ambitious to get your updated views on what's going on in this crazy COVID world. So first of all, thanks for taking the time to have this conversation.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
With what's going on in the world right now, we've had a lot of conversation when COVID first started happening, and we were looking at varying aspects of it that you shared. The concept of a balance of risk assessment and kind of all the mistakes that were being made, and from your point of view, and this comes from an informed point of view that I think we should start with for people that might not have seen the interview that we did probably a year and a half ago or so. So talk about your background and sort of your academic and professional activities.